Mr. Sikorsky, will you tell us how you happened to get into the transoceanic flying field?
As I mentioned earlier, we went into the amphibian field, and this consequently placed us in the flying boat field, and in turn resulted in our getting the first contract for a large, even though short-range flying boat to carry 40 passengers, which was about twice as many as the largest transport of that time carried, for Pan American Airways. We built the flying boat. It was a good one, called S-40 flying boat, and by the way, this is this model here which hangs over my head nearly. I was among the passengers during the first flight of this boat from Miami to Kingston, Jamaica, Barranquilla, Colombia, and Panama Canal. The head of the expedition and chief pilot was Charles Lindbergh, and I had a great chance, and I would say privilege, to spend a great deal of time with him, to learn, to respect, and admire this man in every respect, in every connection, tremendously. Every evening, we were going with the crew for dinner. We were flying only during the daytime and staying in the hotels overnight in Puerto Rico, in Jamaica, Barranquilla, and finally Panama Canal. So every evening, we were sitting together with Lindbergh on a table with the rest of the crew, in which he and I were usually taking the menu, turning it upside down, and starting to make sketches or plans or specification for a transoceanic flying boat. We both believed that transatlantic flying is possible. At that time, a flying boat seemed to be the right solution, and we hoped and believed that it can be done. Consequently, when we came back from this trip, Lindbergh and I decided that he will sell the idea to Pan American Airways, which may have had it anyway, but Lindbergh was the advisor of them, and I would do similarly to United Aircraft, insisting that we take a job like that, because I believe that we can fulfill the contract. Now, all this did materialize. Contract was placed, and in 1934, the first big flying boat, called S-42, with an unusual for that time combination of a very long range with a fairly high speed, was put for the first time into the water and then into the air. The ship fully confirmed the hopes which we have given it. It was capable to fly across the Atlantic Ocean or any other ocean. It had the lifting capacity, had the range, and had the cruising speed of the order of 160 miles per hour, which again at that time was a high speed, good enough to begin the flight, to begin such service. In connection with this airplane, I would like to mention the following interesting fact. 1934 was still a pretty hard time for American aviation. There has been a considerable amount of criticism, some of it undoubtedly unfriendly. And I remember that in July, we received a letter from the president of the National Aeronautical Association asking to make efforts to establish world records, because this was the recognized yardstick of the quality of the ships. Now it so happened that on the evening of the same day, in the morning of which we received this letter, we were able to reply that in line with your letter, the company tried to establish world records, and as of this evening, we added 8 world records to the existing world records of the United States. I think they were 9 total at that time or so. We added 8, thereby bringing the United States to the first place as to the tenure of the world record, with France being first. It was a pretty brilliant flight because it was one of these combined speed, distance, and load flights which are perhaps the most indicative to the practical value of the aircraft. The big ship has been piloted by a crew of 3 famous men: Lindbergh, Music, who was the chief pilot of Pan American Airways, and our Captain Boris Sergeyevsky, who was the holder of a number of world records.
Igor Sikorsky, a Russian-born engineer who hopes to build an airplane capable of transatlantic passenger flying. By 1931, Sikorsky is progressing toward his goal.
We are inaugurating the first flight with passengers on the largest passenger-carrying ship which ever was used on any established airline. The ship was established and worked out in close cooperation with the Pan American Airways and their representative and their advisor, Colonel Lindbergh.
Sikorsky recalls a friendship crucial to his career.
I respect and trust Lindbergh during these years of cooperation. His advices were constructive, sound, simple, and to the point. It's a man with outstanding, brilliant knowledge and intuition in all phases of flying. Now, in this flight, I took place as a passenger, but I spent all the time virtually with the crew, with Lindbergh, with the boys in the pilot cabin. Every evening, so Lindbergh and I would sit nearby. We would take the menu and start writing specifications, sketches, and so forth of the transatlantic airplane. At that time, the transatlantic flying was still considered rather impossible. And approximately 1/2 of experts insisted that for short distance airplane, transoceanic, rigid dirigible, and nothing else.